Good morning, everyone. I think last week we rushed ahead a bit. I would like to go back to the bottom of page 583. This passage in Canto 2, the journey in eternal night and the voice of the darkness. It describes a very poignant and significant experience of Savitri when she loses sight of Satyavan in the darkness. There was this simile, we read it last week, about the hunters leaving the poor bullock alone in the forest at night, knowing that the tiger will come. At the bottom of page 583. We speak of mind. Line 56, mind could not think, breath could not breathe, the soul could not remember or feel itself. It seemed a hollow gulf of sterile emptiness, a zero, oblivious of the sum it closed. An abnegation of the Maker's joy, saved by no wide repose, no depth of peace. On all that claims here to be truth and God, and conscious self, and the revealing word, and the creative rapture of the mind, and love, and knowledge and heart's delight, there fell the immense refusal of the eternal no. Savitri has encountered this refusal before. If we go back quite a long way to Canto 7, we know that Asvapati also has had to face this eternal no. Now, how is Savitri going to deal with this situation? We can read on from there. I think we're moving this way. Bhavana, would you begin from the top of page 584?
As disappears a golden lamp in gloom, born in distance from the eye's desire, into the shadows vanished Savitri. There was no force, no path, no end or goal. Visionless, she moved amid insensible gulfs, or drove through some great black unknowing waste, or whirled in a dumb eddy of meeting winds assembled by the titan hands of chance. There was none with her in the dreadful vast. She saw no more the way tremendous God. Her eyes had lost their luminous Satyavan. Yet not for this her spirit failed, but held more deeply than the bounded senses can, which grasp externally and find to lose its object love. So when on earth they live, She had felt him straying through the glades a scene in her. Its clefts her being's vistas, opening their secrets to his search and joy, because to jealous sweetness in her heart, whatever happy space his cherished feet preferred must be at once her soul embracing his body, fashioning dumbly to his tread. But now a silent gulf between them came, unto abysmal loneliness she fell, even from herself cast out, from love removed. Long hours, since long it seems when sluggish time is measured by the throbs of the soul's pain, in an unreal darkness, empty and dreaded, she travelled treading on the carts of life, lost in a blindness of extinguished souls.
This experience of abysmal loneliness, where her soul loses contact with itself and with Satyavan. Perhaps this is an experience which we may have to pass through at the time of death, when everything that has been familiar, or in the process of death, that everything that has been familiar seems to vanish, and we are utterly alone in a dark blackness. Anybody has anything they would like to ask about this passage, which... Sorry? Glades. Yes, glades are little open spaces in a forest. So when they were together on earth, then Satyavan would go into the forest and cut his wood and do all these things. But Savitri was conscious of all his movements as if they were happening within her. But now this has changed. Even this has been taken away from her. So as I was saying, if we go right back to Canto 7, Asvapati passes through a similar experience of being swallowed up by nothingness.
You mean the travel of the words in Canto 7?
Yes. Yes. Book 2, Canto 7, yes. Asvapati passes through a similar experience of absolute loneliness and threats looming.
And line 88.
Yes.
Passioning dumbly to his tread.
Yes, it's such a nice image. No, it's when he was in the forest and she was at home. No, it's as if the forest is something like a scene in her heart, and his whatever happy space his cherished feet prepared, wherever he felt like wandering, she feels that as her soul embracing his body and feeling the passionate delight of the touch of his feet, passioning dumbly to his tread. That's how it was.
So he has created a verb, or it exists?
Sorry?
Shall we know he created a verb, or it exists?
Well, the word passioning perhaps exists, yes.
Is this experience similar to the Christian's dark night of the soul?
Yes, yes, definitely. So shall we read on? Line 89.
97.
97. So during
No, I want to read this line. But now, a silent gulf. In the past, that gulf hadn't been there. But now, in this darkness, a silent gulf between them came. And to abysmal loneliness she fell. This is the first time Savitri has felt this separation. Even from herself cast out. From love remote, everything has gone. And this goes on for long hours. Since long, it seems, when sluggish time is measured by the throbs of the soul's pain. Sri Aurobindo must have experienced these things that he's sharing with us. Sorry? Sluggish. You know what a slug is? In your garden, you get slugs. They eat the lettuces and the leaves. They move very, very, very slowly. So anyone who's sluggish, they move only very slowly. Here it is the hours that are passing, or time is passing very slowly because of this state of terrible loneliness that she is in. Time doesn't pass smoothly and quickly.
And when you're very tired.
Or if you're sluggish, if you've worked very hard, you may feel sluggish, like a slug. Yes. I want to go back to the beginning of the sentence, where it says long hours, line 92. I know we've read it before. Let's read it again. Whose turn is it to read? Manohar.
Long hours. Since long it seems when sluggish time is measured by the throbs of the soul's pain. In an unreal darkness, empty and drear, she travelled treading on the corpse of life, lost in a blindness of extinguished souls. Solitary in the anguish of the void, she lived. In spite of death, she conquered still. In vain her puissant being was oppressed. Her heavy, long monotony of pain, tardily of his fierce self-torture tired. At first a faint, inextinguishable gleam, pale but immortal, flickered in the gloom as if a memory came to spirits dead, a memory that wished to live again, dissolved from mind in nature's natal sleep. It wandered like a lost ray of the moon, revealing to the night her soul of dread. Serpentine in the gleam of the darkness lolled, its black hoods jeweled with the mystic glow. Its dull, sleek folds shrank back and coiled and slid, as though they felt all light a cruel pain and suffered from the pale approach of hope. Night assailed her heavy sombre reign. The splendor of some bright eternity threatened with this faint beam of wandering truth, her empire of the everlasting note. implacable in her intolerant strength and confident that she alone was true, she strove to stifle the frail, dangerous ray. Aware of an all-negating immensity, she reared her giant head of nothingness, her mouth of darkness swallowing all that is. She saw in herself the tenebrous absolute. But still the light prevailed, and still it grew, and Savitri to her lost self awoke. Her limbs refused the cold embrace of death, her heartbeats triumphed in the grasp of pain, her soul persisted, claiming for its joy, the soul of the beloved now seen no more.
Anybody would like to ask anything about this passage? So for a long time, she continues in this state, but still she lives in spite of death. Something within her is refusing all this dark suggestion of death. In vain, her puissant being, her strong, powerful being was oppressed by these suggestions, these dark suggestions. Her heavy, long monotony of pain, that is the experience she was having. But slowly, tardily, it becomes tired of its fierce self-torture. The pain itself becomes tired of itself. So in that complete darkness, at first, a faint, inextinguishable gleam. I think it is Savitri herself brings this little light into the darkness. It's pale, but immortal. It's flickering in the gloom. He says, it's as if a memory came to spirits dead. Perhaps we can remember the very beginning of the poem, when the whole world is full of black negation, the gods are asleep, there isn't anything. No. But a memory comes to a soul long dead, and it aspires to live again. And that memory and that little light is enough to awaken the divine dawn at the beginning of the poem. So here it is something similar, a memory that wished to live again. A soul that has been dead wishes to live. This dissolves from mind. Although this memory is there, has been dissolved from mind in nature's natal sleep, the sleep of nature at the very beginning of things. That little light wandered like a lost ray of the moon, revealing to the night her soul of dread. So that's what's happening. That tiny little light, which is Savitri's light, is revealing to the darkness of the night itself what it looks like. There's a description of what it looks like. Tinaka, would you like to read?
What is the meaning of lull?
To lull. if you don't sit up straight, your teacher may tell you, don't loll like that. Sit up straight.
Yeah. Night felt assailed her heavy, somber reign. The splendor of some bright eternity threatened with this faint beam of wandering truth her empire of the everlasting naught. Implacable in her intolerant strength and confident that she alone was true, she strove to stifle the frail, dangerous ray. Aware of an all-negating immensity, she reared her giant head of nothingness, her mouth of darkness swallowing all that is. She saw in herself the tenebrous absolute. But still the light prevailed, and still it grew, and Savitri to her lost self awoke. Her limbs refused the cold embrace of death. Her heartbeats triumphed in the grasp of pain. Her soul persisted, claiming for its joy the soul of the beloved now seen no more. Before her, in the stillness of the world, once more she heard the treading of a god. And out of the dumb darkness, Satyavan, her husband, grew into a luminous shade.
Let's pause there. A shade is a shadow, no? But this is a luminous shadow. And that was the form that Satyavan took on when he stepped over the boundary of the death world. He took on this form of a luminous shade. She lost sight of it for a bit, but now again she sees it again. Anything to ask? This tenebrous means full of shadows. Or darkness. This figure of night here is interesting, no? It's in the form of a serpent, serpentine in the gleam, that darkness lulled, with many hoods, a snake not just with one cobra hood, but many. It's black hoods, and that little light is reflected from the black hoods. It's black hoods jeweled with the mystic glow. But they shrink back from that glow, from that light. It's dull, sleek, means shiny. It's dull, sleek, folds shrank back and coiled and slid as though they felt all light a cruel pain and suffered from the pale approach of hope, which Savitri's light represents. Night, yes?
Is the night always female in Sanskrit? Like me? Is there a reason?
La nuit, in French it is feminine.
Is it all over the poem like that?
I can't assure you of that, but perhaps if he's once decided to make the darkness feminine, perhaps it will remain like that throughout the poem. Yeah. You could do some searching and find out.
In several languages it's feminine. La nuit, die Nacht, la notte, it's all feminine.
Perhaps because the sun, which represents the day, is usually, except in German, male.
It was feminine. But I think that we shouldn't make
now with this historical feminism, we mix a grammatical thing with the sex, and it doesn't mean that it's feminine in relation with the women. I don't feel that at all. You know what I mean? Now we
So the night or the moon, we can think of these poetically with this feminine.
Yeah, but no, not in the sense of...
We don't have to take it too literally. Anyway, throughout this passage, when it says she, it's not referring to Savitri, it's referring to the night and the darkness. In this form of a kind of giant serpent with a mouth of darkness which is swallowing everything that is. And that night is seeing in herself an absoluteness of darkness, a tenebrous absolute. That is the way the night feels herself and her power. But nevertheless, that little light prevails. It gets stronger. It grew. And Savitri overcomes that feeling of being cast out from herself. She awoke again to her lost self. Her limbs refused the cold embrace of death. She feels the life in herself, the warm life. Her heartbeats triumphed even in this grip of pain. And her soul is still clinging to its single will. Her soul persisted, claiming for its joy the soul of the beloved, even though at the moment she can't see him. It's now seen no more. But she's gradually waking up into this world of darkness. Once more, she heard the treading of a god, the sound of, maybe she doesn't see the god, but she can hear his footsteps ahead of her. And she sees out of the dumb darkness this luminous shade, this luminous subtle being, which is Satyavan, the form that Satyavan is in at the moment. So as if in response to that refusal from Savitri, death again speaks. Line 135. Tuan, you will read?
Then a sound pealed through the dead monstrous reel, vast like the surge in a tired swimmer's ears, clamoring a fatal iron-hearted roar, that mission to the night is lethal call. This is my silent dark immensity. This is the home of everlasting night. This is the secrecy of nothingness, entombing the vanity of life's desires. Hast thou beheld thy souls, O transient heart, and known from what the dream thou art was made? In this stark sincerity of nude emptiness, hopest thou still always to last and love? The woman answered not. Her spirit refused. The voice of night that knew, and dead that thought. In her beginningless infinity, Through her soul's reaches unconfined she gazed. She saw the undying fountains of her life. She knew herself eternal, without birth.
Let's pause then. Anything to ask about these words of death and Savitri's response? He's showing her this realm of darkness. This is my home. This is the home of everlasting night. This is the secret retreat of nothingness, of non-existence, which forms a tomb around the vanity, the uselessness, and the helplessness of the desires of life. He says, have you seen? Have you noticed? Have you experienced now where you have come from? What is your origin? This nothingness? Oh, transient heart. Heart is beating, yes, but how long will it beat? Have you realized now the substance from which the dream that you yourself are, where it has come from? From this darkness. In this stark sincerity of nude emptiness, of nothingness. Can you go on still hoping to last and love forever? She doesn't answer him. But within herself, there's a refusal. She doesn't accept what he's telling her. Her spirit refused that voice of night that knew, that has some kind of knowledge, and death that thinks and expresses itself in words. What she is deeply aware of is her own beginningless infinity. That she has not been born and she will not die. She's infinite, unlimited. She can gaze through all the vast, infinite and eternal stretches of her own soul. She sees where her life has come from, the undying fountains of her life. She knew herself eternal, without birth. So she doesn't have to answer death. She knows that he cannot touch her. But he continues. Patty, will you read?
I don't want to read this.
Oh, you don't want to read that stuff. Okay, all right. Can we ask Brian, will you do it?
But still opposing her with endless night. Death, the dire god, inflicted on her eyes the immortal calm of his tremendous gaze. Although thou hast survived the unborn void, which never shall forgive, while time endures, the primal violence that fashioned thought, forcing the immobile vast to suffer and live. This sorrowful victory only hast thou won, to live for a little without Satyavan. What shall the ancient goddess give to thee who helps thy heartbeats? Only she prolongs the nothing dreamed existence and delays with the labour of living, thy eternal sleep, a fragile miracle of thinking clay. Armed with illusions, walks the child of time. To fill the void around he feels and dreads. The void he came from and to which he goes, he magnifies his self and names it God. He calls the heavens to help his suffering hopes. He sees above him with a longing heart bare spaces more unconscious than himself, that have not even his privilege of mind, and empty of all but their unreal blue, and peoples them with bright and merciful powers. For the sea roars around him, and earth quakes beneath his steps, and fire is at his doors, and death prowls baying through the woods of life. Moved by the presences with which he yearns, he offers in implacable shrines his soul, and clothes all with the beauty of his dreams. The gods who watch the earth with sleepless eyes and guide its giant stumblings through the void have given to man the burden of his mind. In his unwilling heart they have lit their fires and sown in it incurable unrest. His mind is a hunter upon tracks unknown, amusing time with vain discovery. He deepens with thought the mystery of his fate, and turns to song his laughter and his tears. His morality vexing with the immortal's dreams, troubling his transience with the infinite's breath. They gave him hungers which no food can fill. He is the cattle of the shepherd gods.
Let's pause there. So, since he cannot defeat Savitri, he's giving her a big lecture. You have survived this void, this emptiness. You've passed through it and you've not been dissolved. But this unborn void, this infinite nothingness from which everything has come, will never forgive. While time endures, as long as there is any kind of time, the primal violence that fashioned thought, the original act of disobedience or of contradiction of the universe, the primal violence that fashioned thought, which allowed thinking beings to exist in the universe, forcing the immobile vast to suffer and live. That's what has happened, this primal violence. The result has been life, thought, desire, yearning, all this has come into existence. Well, you've survived that emptiness. The only victory that you've won is that you can live for a little while without Satyavan.
Question to this primal violence. We have here this from the book 1, how the qualities went in their negative power. Is this something connected to this?
Yes, I think so. Yes. I mean, it's a different way of putting it. There, the mother has given it as a sense of importance in themselves, those powers which has made them cut connection with their divine origin, and then they've turned into their opposites. So one way of seeing that is as of an original act of defiance, of disobedience to the laws of the universe. So he says, you've survived my darkness, but what's that going to win you? There's only this sorrowful victory you've won, that you will be able to go on living for a little while without Satyavan. Of course, in the traditional story, he keeps telling her to go back. You can go on living, but you won't be able to take Satyavan with you.
So only she prolongs the nothing between existence.
Yeah, quite a violent grammar there, no? What shall the ancient goddess give you? She will only prolong, she will not make something last a little longer. What is that? That is this nothing, this nothingness, which you dream is your existence. And so it delays, it puts off, sorry, I'll come back to you. It delays with the labor of living. You will have to go on living sometime before you can fall into the inevitable eternal sleep, which is your ultimate destiny.
This is perhaps Durga. Is it the ancient goddess because she bowed down to
She bowed down to Durga. But I think it is more than just Durga. I think the goddess who is supporting Savitri through all this ordeal is the supreme Savitri, the goddess of truth, the one whom Aswapati had worshipped for 18 years, and Savitri was born as the result of his tapasya. And that is the supreme goddess who eventually, at the end of this book 10, takes possession of Savitri's body and tells the god of death what's what. It's today.
It's today.
How interesting. I knew there was a day, but I didn't know the date. It's the same date wherever you are in India?
All of us.
All over.
All over India. It is the day the Tamil months, 1 month ends, and the next month in the junction. It is not a
1 month or the other. It's at the juncture.
We celebrate it by tying threads, no?
Yes.
And as she did, we used to prepare the things to offer to the goddess Savitri. And then the whole day we
It's fasting.
And used to read the Savitri Satyavan Purana. The whole day they used to read.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Bhavan. I knew there was a day, but I thought perhaps it was different in different parts of India. Once Dr. Nadkarni mentioned to us that Satyavan had to die at the hottest hour of the hottest day of the hottest month, but we haven't quite reached that yet, no?
Actually,
that's only symbolic.
The summer starts from today.
Today.
After that hour, summer
That's
starts.
the beginning of summer. Thank you.
Is it fixed date or change every year? Is it fixed date?
Changes, date changes, but it is the auspicious time between the previous month and the next month, the Tamil months, this is the last 11th month and the 12th month, it is. The beginning of the
The new year.
New month, the last month of the year.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it says that in a way it never ends. The year never ends. It goes on, goes on.
Yes. It's an endless cycle. Yes, yes. So shall we continue looking at this lecture which Death is giving to Savitri about man?
I'm sorry, what line?
Now I'm coming to line 166, I think, Don. We might have gone further, yes. But let's go back to this, what he is saying, his view, Death's view of what humanity is. Starting at line 166. A fragile miracle of thinking clay, armed with illusions, walks the child of time. That's us. To fill the void around he feels and dreads, the void he came from and to which he goes, he magnifies his self and names it God. This is to fill up the emptiness which we feel around us. And we dread, we're afraid of that emptiness. The original emptiness from which we came and to which we will return. So to avoid that feeling, we magnify our sense of identity, ourself, and calls it God. And then he calls the heavens, the higher realms of existence, to help his suffering hopes. He sees above him, with a longing heart, bare spaces more unconscious of him than himself, that have not even his privilege of mind, empty of all but their unreal blue. Of course, the blue that we see, we look up to the sky, to the heavens, the higher realms. That blue is, of course, an illusion. And these heavens that we call to and ask for their help and support, they are not even as conscious as we ourselves are. So we people those empty heavens. We imagine them to be full of bright and merciful powers, because we are surrounded by danger. The sea roars around him, earth quakes beneath his steps, fire is at his doors, and death prowls, baying like a hunting dog, baying, or a wolf through the woods of life. The woods, the forest, it's a very ancient symbol for the life world. Moved by those presences which he's imagined and which he's longing for, he makes sacrifices. He offers his soul in implacable shrines. It's no use offering anything to those shrines. Nothing will appease or soothe them or please them. They are implacable. But we go on making these sacrifices. And we clothe, we robe everything with the beauty of our own dreams. Of course, we must remember this is death's view. This is the view that he's trying to convince us of. The gods who watch the earth with sleepless eyes and guide its giant stumblings through the void have given to man the burden of his mind. So here, death, he will argue anything. Here he seems to be suggesting that these gods are real and have real powers and can affect the life of human beings. They've given to man this burden of his mind. They've lit their fires in the unwilling hearts of human beings and sown in us incurable unrest. We'll never be able to cure this restlessness, which is our human nature, he says. And he continues to describe his mind. The human mind is a hunter upon tracks unknown, amusing time, passing his time with vain discovery, useless, meaningless discovery. He deepens with thought the mystery of his fate. This makes me think of discussions among philosophers that we sometimes see on TV or elsewhere, that we are amusing time with vain discovery. He deepens with thought the mystery of his fate and turns to song his laughter and his tears. That's something more positive. He vexes, he troubles his mortality, his state, which is subject to death and ignorance. To vex means to trouble. He troubles his mortality with the immortal's dreams. He troubles his transience with the infinite's breath. Or actually, it's the gods who are doing this to him. They gave him hungers which no food can fill. He is the cattle of the shepherd gods. They are the shepherds driving us all around. The body is the tether, the rope with which we are tied in our pastures. And the gods cast for fodder, fodder is animal food, grief and hope and joy. They feed us on all these emotions. They have fenced around his pasture ground, where the animals we are living, with ignorance. Into his fragile, undefended breast, into his heart, his weak heart, they have breathed a courage that is met by death. They, the gods, have given a wisdom that is mocked by night. And darkness of ignorance just makes nonsense of that wisdom they give, false wisdom. They have traced a journey that foresees no goal, an endless journey that goes on and on and on forever.
This last thing is what you just said. They have traced the journey that foresees no goal. It is something like pointed in the negative path, and but when you look at evolution of consciousness, you can be joyful.
That there's no end.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's always this twisting what is coming here in, and it is, how you say, difficult to get. Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a very mocking speech of death, no? It's meant to be discouraging and, yeah.
It's interesting what he says about mind. First he says privilege of mind.
Yes.
And then he says that the burden.
The burden of mind.
Some help in that.
Is that Helga sitting up there? Sorry, are you Helga?
No.
Swaha, yes. Would you like to read Swaha? Sorry.
His body the tether with which he is tied. They cast for fodder grief and hope and joy. His pasture ground they have fenced with ignorance. Into his fragile, undefended breast they have breathed a courage that is met by death. They have given a wisdom that is mocked by night. They have traced a journey that foresees no goal. Aimless man toils in an uncertain world, lulled by inconstant pauses of his pain, scourged like a beast by the infinite desire, bound to the chariot of the dreadful gods. But if thou still canst hope and still wouldst love, return to thy body's shell, thy tie to earth, and with thy heart's little remnants try to live. Hope not to win back to thee, Satyavan. Yet since thy strength deserves no trivial crown, gifts I can give thee, gifts I can give to soothe thy wounded life, the pacts which transient beings make with fate, and the wayside sweetness earthbound hearts would pluck. These, if thy will accepts, make freely thine. Choose a life's hopes for thy deceiving prize.
He has to give her something. But he's making it seem like a great privilege. If you still can hope after everything I've said and shown to you, if you still believe in and want to love, go back to the earth, back to your physical body, and try to live with your heart's little remnants, with whatever is left of your love. Don't hope that you can really win Satyavan back to you. He will tell this to her over and over again. I'll give you this, I'll give you that, but not Satyavan. No? Hope not to win back to thee, Satyavan. And yet, he has to give her some kind of tribute. Yet, since thy strength deserves no trivial crown, he knows she's done a great thing. She's won a great victory. He has to admit that. Since thy strength deserves no trivial crown, no worthless crown, something that's really worth, I can give gifts to soothe thy wounded life, to make your life, which has in a way been spoiled and damaged, to make it more comfortable. The pacts which transient beings make with fate, and the wayside sweetness earthbound hearts would pluck. These, if thy will accepts, make freely thine. Choose a life's hopes for thy deceiving prize.
What is offering exactly?
Sorry?
What is offering exactly?
He's saying the kind of things that people value in a lifetime. You can choose anything like that you want. I will give it to you. And what does she answer? She exactly does this. She chooses a life's hopes. That's what he offers to her. That's what she chooses. But first there's this beautiful description of what happens to Savitri, within Savitri, when she receives this offer. Who's reading next? Paula?
As ceased the ruthless and tremendous voice, unendingly there rose in Savitri, like moonlit ridges on a shuddering flood, a stir of thoughts out of some silence born, across the sea of her dumb, fathomless heart. At last she spoke. Her voice was heard by night. I bow not to thee, O huge mask of death, black lie of night to the cowed soul of man, unreal, inescapable end of things, thou grim jest played with the mortal spirit. Conscious of immortality I walk, a victor spirit, conscious of my force, not as a suppliant to thy gates I came. Unslain, I have survived the clutch of night. My first strong grief moves not my seated mind. My unwept tears have turned to pearls of strength. I have transformed my ill-shaped brittle clay into the hardness of a statued soul. Now, in the wrestling of the splendid gods, my spirit shall be obstinate and strong against the vast refusal of the world. I stoop not with the subject mob of minds who run to glean with eager, satisfied hands and pick from its mire, mid many trampling feet, its scornful small concessions to the weak. Mine is the labor of the battling gods, imposing on the slow, reluctant years the flaming will that reigns beyond the stars. They lay the law of mind on matter's worth and win the soul's wish from earth's inconscient force. First, I demand whatever Satyavan, my husband, waking in the forest's charm, out of his long, pure childhood's lonely dreams, desired and had not for his beautiful life. Give if thou must, or if thou canst, refuse. Death bowed his head in scornful, cold assent. The builder of this dreamlike earth for man, who has mocked with vanity all gifts he gave. Uplifting his disastrous voice, he spoke. Indulgent to the dreams my touch shall break. I yield to his blind father's longing heart, kingdom and power and friends and greatness lost and royal trappings for his peaceful age. The pallid pomps of man's declining days, the silvered decadent glories of life's fall. To one who wiser grew by adverse fate, goods I restore, the deluded soul prefers to impersonal nothingness's bare sublime. The sensuous solace of the light I give to eyes which could have found a larger realm, a deeper vision in their fathomless night. For that this man desired and asked in vain, while still he lived on earth and cherished hope.
So this is what he's ready to do.
Anything to ask? We just read this passage once more. Yet, since thy strength deserves no trivial crown, gifts I can give to soothe thy wounded life. The pacts, the bargains which transient beings like us make with fate. We accept compromises with fate. The wayside sweetness earth-bound hearts would pluck, the joys of life as we go through it. These, if thy will accepts, make freely thine. You can have as much of those things as you want. Just tell me. As ceased the ruthless and tremendous voice, unendingly there rose in Savitri, like moonlit ridges on a shuddering flood, a stir of thoughts out of some silence born across the sea of her dumb fathomless heart. Such a wonderful image within Savitri's being. It's as if there's a vast sea that's lit by the moon of mind, moonlit ridges on a shuddering flood, the waves of a sea lit by the moon. There's some movement like that in Savitri's heart, a stir of thoughts out of some silence born. They move across the sea of her dumb, fathomless heart, this heart which is so deep its depths can't be measured. And she pauses a while. At last she spoke. Her voice was heard by night.
I see you heard by night and not by day. I will try to put the night in.
Ask the poet. Of course, it's heard by death as well. But it's heard by all this darkness, all this surrounding darkness of his realm.
In Buddha's...
You've lost it. I'm reading on line 221 to 3.
220.
Yeah. I bow not to thee.
I bow not to thee.
Oh, huge mask of night, she's suggesting that this also is unreal. It's just a cardboard face put on, no? Black lie of night. You are not really like this, no? To the cowed soul of man. You make us afraid of you, but it's all a deceit. You present yourself as the unreal, inescapable end of things, death. But you're actually, it's just a grim jest, a joke, a bad joke played with the immortal spirit, which can't be tricked like that. No? Conscious of immortality, I walk. She can't be tricked like that. She knows her origins and her goal. And she asserts this to him. It's a wonderful passage. Courageous defiance, a victor spirit, conscious of my force. Not as a suppliant to thy gates I came. I'm not a beggar. I'm not coming to ask you for anything. Unslain, I have survived the clutch of night, of this darkness, this terrifying darkness and negation. I have survived, you know that. My first strong grief moves not my seated mind. I'm tranquil, steady. I'm not disturbed by all this. My unwept tears. We had mentioned right at the very beginning of the poem that there's this God who's expecting the daily oblation of Savitri's tears, the tears that she doesn't shed. It's one of her outstanding characteristics, that she doesn't weep. My unwept tears have turned to pearls of strength. I have transformed my ill-shaped, brittle clay, this body, the substance of this body, into the hardness of a statued soul, a firm form that can't be easily broken. Now, in the wrestling of the splendid gods, my spirit shall be obstinate and strong against the vast refusal of the world. That's what you are, death, the vast refusal of the world. I'm not going to lean down with the subject mob of minds who run to glean with eager, satisfied hands and pick from its mire and mud mid many trampling feet its scornful small concessions to the weak. As if you, death, are a great lord scattering almost worthless gold coins for people to run and scrabble in the mud and pick them up. I'm not like that. I'm not interested in your scornful small concessions to the weak, the little payments that you give. Mine is the labor of the battling gods. And she says what the battling gods are doing. They impose on the slow, reluctant years the flaming will that reigns beyond the stars. Beyond the edge of the universe, there's a flaming will. We see it in the figure of Shiva Nataraja. No.
Yes.
Yeah. those battling gods, they lay the law of mind on matter's works and win the soul's wish from earth's inconscient force. The gods can do this. They can defy the laws of physics and matter. They can win the soul's wish from the inconscient force of earth, of matter. So then she gives her demand, her request. Well, not a request, a demand. First, I demand whatever Satyavan, my husband, waking in the forest's charm out of his long, pure childhood's lonely dreams, desired and had not for his beautiful life. Give if thou must, or if thou canst, refuse, don't give. She knows that he can't refuse. Death bowed his head in scornful, cold assent. He's still showing off to be the Lord, no? The builder of this dream-like earth for man, who has mocked with vanity all gifts he gave. He's cheating us. Uplifting his disastrous voice, he spoke. Indulgent to the dreams my touch shall break. I will give him gifts, but they won't last long. I yield to his Satyavan's blind father's longing heart. This is what he wanted, his life's desires. Kingdom and power and friends and greatness lost. He's been driven out of his kingdom. Royal trappings for his peaceful age. Let him become a great, old, honored king. The pallid pomps of man's declining days, of the older years, elder years, the silver decadent glories of life's fall, the silver decadent glories of life's fall. And one more thing he's going to give. To one who wiser grew by adverse fate. This is Satyavan's father. He was outlawed and he had to live in the forest, but somehow through this process and these sufferings, he has grown wiser. I restore, I give back to him goods, good things, which the deluded soul prefers to impersonal nothingnesses, bare, sublime. Again, it's trying to take the goodness away from the gift. I give the sensuous solace of the light, the possibility of sight. I give back to the eyes of Dyumatsena, Satyavan's father, to eyes which could have found a larger realm. He's saying if he didn't want his eyesight back, he could have gained a great inner sight, a deeper vision in their fathomless night. But anyway, these things I'm giving you because that's what this man, Satyavan, desired and what he asked for in vain while still he lived on earth and cherished hope. I think we'll stop there for today. Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.
At last she spoke, her voice heard by night. I bow not to thee, O huge mask of death, black lie of night to the cowed soul of man. Conscious of immortality, I walk. First, I demand whatever Satyavan, my husband, waking in the forest to charm, out of his long, pure childhood's lonely dreams, desire, and had not, for his beautiful life, give if thou must, or if thou canst refuse.